There's an old legend about a dispatch runner for Canada's 107th Pioneer Battalion during the Great War. He was leading an officer through dangerous territory to the front, and the officer, finally exhausted, unable to keep up the pace, said, "Slow down, man. Who do you think I am, Tom Longboat?" To which the man replied, "No, sir. I am." He's been called Canada's first professional athlete. He bravely served his country, broke all sorts of running records, even while facing racism and disdain. Like superstar athletes today, at one time, hundreds of thousands of people cheered his victories and knew his name, although he died in poverty and relative obscurity. Tom Longboat, the man the press called the streak of bronze to Wildfire, deserves to be remembered. Sources disagree on when Thomas Charles Longboat was born. Some say he was born June 4th, 1887. Others claim the day was July 4th, 1886. His traditional name was Kagwaji and translates roughly to everything. He was a member of the Wolf Clan of the Onondaga tribe of the Six Nations Reservation in southern Ontario, Canada. Longboat's family practiced the Longhouse religion, a religious movement founded in 1799 that combined elements of Christianity with traditional Iroquois beliefs. The tenets of the religion were received by a Native American named Handsome Lake, and the oral tradition became known as the Code of Handsome Lake. Some historians say Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, was influenced by the Code of Handsome Lake when he received his own prophetic visions. As a young boy, Longboat was forced by the government to attend the Mohawk Institute Residential School, an institution which required its charges to give up their religions, languages, and cultures in order to become anglicized. Longboat ran away from the school and hid at his uncle's house. Later, after he became famous for his athleticism, school officials asked him to return and give a speech at the school. He laconically replied, "I wouldn't even send my dog to that place." After escaping the school, he began to work for his family and do farm work. Some say he became a fast runner by chasing cows around farms. Another Longboat legend says that he once ran a 40-mile distance and easily beat his mother home, which was doubly impressive because she had been riding in a wagon. Others say Longboat's speed caught the attention of Bill Davis, a Mohawk runner who also lived on the Six Nations Reservation, and he helped develop the boy's skills further. Davis was an accomplished runner himself, who had finished second in the 1901 Boston Marathon, a race remembered for a horse famously jumping the runners for part of the distance. When he was 19 years old, Longboat placed second at the Victoria Day race in 1905. His next result was more impressive when he won the Around the Bay Road Race, the oldest long-distance race in North America, by more than 3 minutes. Officials were stunned by the result, shaking their watches because they believed the time couldn't be correct. Historians say at one point in the race, Longboat ran 3/4 of the length of a football field in the wrong direction before someone pointed out his mistake and put him back on the race path. Of his finish at the Around the Bay Road race, reporters said Tom Longboat left his competitors as if they were standing still, and Longboat is the greatest distance runner the world has ever seen. His reputation preceded him when Longboat attended the Boston Marathon the next year. He ran on behalf of the West Toronto YMCA and joined the 124 other runners in front of a crowd of over 100,000 who came to watch the event. Newspaper reporters had hounded Longboat for interviews before the event, but he turned down every request. Longboat broke the Boston Marathon record by 5 minutes, with a finishing time of 2 hours, 24 minutes, and 24 seconds. Some of the runners had been delayed by a train going through the course, and a snowstorm had hit later in the day, slowing participants further. But Longboat was so far ahead that he was sitting down to a well-deserved dinner of oysters and steak with his 3-foot-high bronze Mercury trophy by the time the rest of the runners finished. The Boston Globe reported, "Never before in the annals of running, either amateur or professional, in this country or abroad, has Longboat's performance been approached." They noticed his manner of running was completely different from others. Longboat held his arms down, his hand at his hip, rather than up at his chest, as was the custom at the time. Other runners ran on their toes. Longboat used his entire foot in a long-legged stride, making the most of his 5'11" frame. Longboat developed a new method of training where we'd alternate days of hard practice with less strenuous recovery days. Now that's used pretty commonly today, but in the time, some people referred to that practice as lazy and claimed that it was emblematic of his heritage. Despite naysayers, Longboat had become a legend. When he returned to Toronto, Canada, his home country welcomed him with a triumphant parade where more than 200,000 people attended to cheer his victory. A Union Jack was placed around his shoulders and was given the keys to the city. Officials made speeches to the cheering crowd. The mayor of Toronto reportedly said, "The British Empire is proud of you." Even in the midst of his triumph, the newspapers had trouble reporting on his success without making disparaging comments about his race. The Toronto Herald wrote, "It is hoped that Longboat's success will not develop obstinacy on his part, and that he will continue to be manageable." But the Brantford Courier, another Canada newspaper, looked upon Longboat more favorably. Whether Tom Longboat's address is Toronto, Brantford, Hamilton, Cayuga, or Caledonia, there's no doubt that he is a Canadian, and we are proud of him. Newspapers coined all sorts of nicknames for him, some more complimentary than others. There was, of course, the Streak of Bronze to Wildfire, but also the Speedy Son of the Forest and the Caledonian Cyclone. But there was also the Racing Redskin and the Irish Indian. Shortly after smashing the record at the Boston Marathon, Longboat was ejected from the Toronto YMCA for participating in a fistfight and, some said, drinking and smoking, which broke the club rules. YMCA officials told the press, "He is headstrong and secretive. A night corps of attendants is necessary to keep him right." Longboat, for his part, didn't seem to harbor any resentment. He wrote to another establishment in what was becoming his trademark laconic style. "Dear Sir, I want to join the Irish Canadian Running Club. Enclosed, find $1. Thomas Longboat." Tom Flanagan, one of the founders of the club and a former athlete, became his manager. Flanagan was a colorful figure. He told the press, "As a cure for staleness, I have always found beer to work without fail. However, I am not a pioneer in this. Nearly all trainers of note prescribe beer." Flanagan maintained Longboat's amateur athlete status by securing a job for him at the Tom Longboat Athletic Cigar Store, where he sold cigars from packages that had his face on them. Longboat didn't thrive at the job, but it was enough to ensure a place for him at the 1908 Olympic Games in London. Though he didn't participate because of health troubles in either Olympic trial organized by the Canadians, Longboat was chosen for the Olympic team because of his astonishing running record in 1907. He was asked to prove his fitness by completing a 15-mile run, which he did handily, even shaved 3 minutes off his personal record. Longboat was unimpressed by his own performance, saying, "I could have gone faster, but Flanagan wouldn't let me." Which is why it was all the more surprising when Longboat collapsed during the Olympic marathon and was unable to finish. Some accuse Flanagan of drugging the star runner in order to take money off of his loss, but others say the extraordinary heat was what caused the troubles. The race itself was a matter of controversy, when Dorando Pietri of Italy collapsed in the last portion and was helped across the finish line for the win, and then disqualified. Longboat, after turning professional, would face Pietri in a race at Madison Square Gardens, where the two world-class athletes ran 260 laps around the track. The venue was so packed that police officers patrolled the crowd to keep the peace. Longboat won, and Pietri collapsed after attempting to keep up with him. Longboat also raced and won against Alfred Schrub, the other most famous runner in the world at the time. Longboat married Loretta Miracle in 1908. Newspapers reported at the time that the two had wanted to marry, but her father thought them too young. So Tom made a deal, asking her father to allow them to marry if he won the race against Dorando Pietri at Madison Square Garden. Though he had a lucrative career as a professional runner, Longboat took the oath of service in February 1916 and joined the 180th Sportsman Battalion to serve his country in World War I. His athletic skills were used in Canada's recruiting propaganda. Longboat and his battalion were shipped out on November 19, 1916, transferred to the 3rd Reserve Battalion, and then in February 1917 reassigned to the 107th Pioneer Battalion. There he participated in a running team used to maintain troop morale against the soul-crushing losses and nightmarish existence of trench warfare. One of 905 men, Longboat did far more than just run. He and the battalion also dug and repaired trenches, constructed dugouts or shelters, hauled ammunition, maintained barbed wire fences, built roads and mule tracks, and more. Longboat also, famously, ran messages in the trenches. Longboat was at Vimy Ridge, Passchendaele, participated in the 100 Days push of the British Expeditionary Force, in which the Canadians suffered the loss of 45,000 men. He also fought at the Battle of Amiens, and part of the engineers assisted at the Canal du Nord. Despite facing a myriad of dangers, Longboat emerged without serious physical wounds from his service in World War I. However, when he returned home, he discovered that he had been declared dead, and his wife had remarried. In addition, while Longboat was serving overseas, a con man named Edgar LaPlante had committed identity theft and been traveling around the United States, making money off of Longboat's reputation. LaPlante even signed up with the U.S. Army Transport Service as Longboat. Longboat wrote a strongly worded letter against LaPlante's actions that read, "I'm going to have 3 charges against this man. 1 for making false statements, 2nd for impersonation, and 3rd for intent to defraud the public at large." Canada gave Longboat a land grant for his service in the Great War, and he remarried. But the Great Depression struck, and like so many others, Longboat had trouble finding a job. He sold his racing medals for money, and finally he found work for the City of Toronto's street cleaning department. The once celebrated runner now collected garbage for a living, but it didn't bother him. When reporters hounded him for his thoughts on his new job, he said, "I'm doing all right, just living along." When the Second World War started, Tom Longboat was too old to serve overseas, but he served in the Home Guard. Later in life, he took to giving out his photograph to newspapers and in taverns in order to deter people who would pretend to be him in order to get perks like free drinks. He died of pneumonia on the Six Nations Reservation in January 1949, and while he died in poverty and far away from the limelight that he once enjoyed, his impact on sports has endured. The Tom Longboat Award, given to outstanding First Nations athletes, was instituted in 1951. He was posthumously inducted into the Canadian Sports Hall of Fame, into the Indian Hall of Fame, and into the Ontario Sports Hall of Fame. Canada has designated him a person of national historic significance, and in 2000 created a stamp bearing his image. But perhaps his greatest service was to selflessly serve his country at a time when Canada hadn't even granted Indigenous peoples the right to vote. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The History Guy, short snippets of forgotten history between 10 and 15 minutes long. And if you did enjoy, please go ahead and click that thumbs up button. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions for future episodes, please write those in the comment section. I will be happy to personally respond. Be sure to follow The History Guy on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and check out our merchandise on teespring.com. And if you'd like more episodes on forgotten history, all you need to do is subscribe.